right, welcome to WSQ number 35. Today we're going to talk about what an animal is. So we've transitioned out of the kingdom of plants, out of the kingdom of protists, out of the kingdom of bacteria, and we're now moving our way towards animals as we expand ever into organisms that are more like ourselves, and ultimately will culminate at the end of this year talking about the human body. But today we're going to start our section or chapter discussing invertebrates. Okay, those are organisms without a backbone. And we start today with just a general overview in this WSQ, pretty short. What is an animal? We're talking about how animal body types are typically organized, what the four major functions of animals are, what the word symmetry refers to and what's it mean, and how animals actually get classified. And this will be our introduction into what we'll continue to study as we study invertebrates, and ultimately human beings. So let's jump in today. So first thing we're going to talk about is what we'd call the structure of animals. Now I started not long ago, we talked a little bit about anatomy and physiology. And I wanted to start out just by defining for us what's going on here. This first term we talk about here, which is anatomy. Anatomy is an organism's structure. Okay, so as you see up here, I put anatomy equals structure. Physiology is the study of the functions of an organism. Okay, and so one thing we have to understand as we study and we start to deal with animals, we're going to start to see early on and throughout all of our view of animals, whether it's in our dissection of frogs, in our study of the human body, in our studying of earthworms, whatever the organisms are that we study, we're going to see with this large kingdom of animals and Animalia that the cells of animals are organized into higher and higher levels of structure. Okay, we've talked about this time and time again. This should not be new to you, but you're going to find that there is going to be cells, and there's going to be tissues, and there's going to be organs, and there's going to be organ systems, and ultimately there's going to be organisms. Okay, so I want to review this real quickly. For all animals, what we're going to be dealing with are multicellular organisms, okay, that do some very specific things, but they're going to be made up of cells. They're going to have tissues and organ systems. Remember, what are cells? Cells, as we know, are the basic units of animal structure. You take a bunch of cells that do similar things, and they are combined into tissue. So in this case, we have an osteocyte. Okay, you put that together, different bone cells put together, you make up bone tissue. The tissue gets organized, so similar tissues go together and they make up an organ. In this case, all those bone tissues come together and make up a bone, right? Like the thigh bone we have there. Those organs, and I've got this for you, those organs work together, okay, and they make up organ systems. So all the bones, which are all different organs, come together and they make up the organ system. That would be the skeleton, okay, of that organism. And then ultimately all those organ systems work together and they make up the whole organism. So the example that we used here is that of a bone cell. So you have an osteocyte, which is a bone cell. A group of osteocytes working together make up bone tissue. A group of bone tissues working together make up the organs of bones. You put all those bones together and you get the skeletal system, right? You get that system. And then you take the skeletal system and the respiratory system and all the reproductive system, all these systems together, and you ultimately get an organism. Now, that's so important. We've already spent a lot of time talking about the cells of various organisms as we've developed and got ready for this, the study of animals. Now we're going to really focus our attention more toward moving away from the cells as much, and we're going to spend more time talking about tissues and organs and organ systems. So we're going to spend more of our time over the next few months talking about this structure right here, okay, and organisms, but not so much on the cells. We're going to kind of move away from that a little bit. Now, animals, when we talk about animals, what do we mean? Okay, animals really have four functions that we can use to help identify what an animal is. Okay, number one, animals are heterotrophs. We know what that is from experience in my class. If you don't know what a heterotroph is yet, here you go. That means they get their food, right? They obtain their food by eating it, right? Animals all need oxygen. Okay, so two things that animals have to obtain are food, that's why they're heterotrophs, and oxygen. Why oxygen? That's for cellular respiration. Just as plants need to have carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, we know that animals have to gain oxygen for cellular respiration. Secondly, animals have to keep their internal conditions stable. Okay, this is a word that we're going to learn. It's called homeostasis. Homeostasis just basically means that animals have certain functions, okay, certain ways of keeping their body conditions where they need to be. For example, sweating is an example of keeping our homeostasis level. Okay, we sweat. Why? To help cool us. So animals that are warm-blooded, okay, that have an internal heating and air conditioning system, basically, will use things like sweating and panting and shivering as means to regulate and maintain a similar temperature. Human beings, we know we want to be right around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's the temperature at which our bodies work well. And so our body has certain mechanisms to cool it and certain mechanisms to heat it to maintain that level. Okay, we have a specific blood pressure and heart rate that is best for our body and that helps us function at our best. And so the body will help keep those conditions stable. Thirdly, a basic function of all animals is they can move. Okay, remember we talked about plants. Most plants can't move, at least move from place to place. Once they're in the soil and anchored, they're gone. Now, maybe they could move as seeds through dispersion, but man, once they're set in the soil, that's it. They're not moving from that place. Animals can move. All animals can move at some point. Some people have asked the question, wait, what about like in the sea, things like coral? Well, what we'll learn with some of those smaller organisms that fit in the animal kingdom, that they even move. They move in a earlier stage of their lifetime before they get anchored, like a clam, same kind of thing. And lastly, we're going to talk about reproducing. All animals can reproduce. And animals are going to reproduce primarily through the means of reproducing sexually. Okay? Meaning that it's going to take a male and a female to produce offspring. Okay? And that's going to be really important. That's going to be distinctive, especially from plants where we had a whole lot of means of asexual reproduction or self-pollination and things like that. So those are the four basic functions: obtaining food and oxygen, keeping internal conditions stable, moving, and reproducing. Now let's talk real quickly. Another overview item is to talk about symmetry. One thing when we talk about symmetry, animals, interestingly enough, come in basically three different types of symmetry. Symmetry is just a word that means the arrangement of body parts in an organism, whether they're equally arranged or unequally arranged, whether there's a pattern to them, whether they're balanced or not. If they are, that's called symmetrical, symmetry. If you think, for example, if I think of a square is an object that is symmetrical, right? You can divide the square in multiple planes and it can be equal, right? There's several different types of symmetry, and I've got pictures of them down below. I'm going to start with the last one. The last one right here, asymmetrical, this means they don't have any symmetry. This is the example here. If you're dealing like with sponges and stuff, I can't divide this animal up. Like if I draw a line through the middle, it's not like, oh yeah, this looks side A looks like side B. No, it doesn't. Okay, their body shape and their arrangement of body parts do not have any rhyme or reason. They're asymmetrical. Then you have some that have what's called radial symmetry. Radial symmetry says that there's many lines that divide an animal into multiple halves. Take, in this case, I'm assuming this is a hydra. It's what it looks like, either a hydra or some type of sea anemone. Notice that I can divide this in multiple planes, and I can't draw it right. That's why we can see it this way, right? I can divide this in multiple planes, and I'm still going to get equal, symmetrical organism, right? Another example would be like a starfish. You can divide starfish in multiple planes, and you're going to get symmetry. And then there's also one more type, which is known as bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry is where there's just one line that divides an animal in halves, and those halves are mirror images. Are they going to be exactly like? No. Okay, but take, for example, myself. I have bilateral symmetry. So do you. Okay? We have a right arm and a left arm, a right eye and a left eye. If you cut a line straight down the middle, okay, we would see bilateral symmetry. This example of this lobster, bilateral symmetry. If you cut it down, there's going to be, right, a right side and a left side. The legs and arms are going to be equal in number. The different features are going to be the same. That's bilateral, and bi, of course, meaning two, okay, symmetry. So those three forms of symmetry are important, and we'll talk a little bit more about these in class. But just understanding the symmetry of an organism is just helps us understand better about why animals' body parts are designed the way that they are. Why did God give us symmetry? How come we don't just have a right arm and no left arm? Well, there's actually quite some real good reasons for it. In physics, for example, there's something to be said of balance. I painted with my dad, and one thing I learned early on is when you carry a 5-gallon bucket of paint, which can weigh around 70 pounds, if I carry just one 5-gallon bucket, it's really hard. But if I carry two, the weights actually balance themselves out, and it makes it easier even though I'm carrying double the weight. The reason why it makes it easier is because I don't have the uneven strain on my body. So bilateral symmetry, for example, which is most organisms in the animal kingdom, it actually helps the animal move and function and survive. And even some damage, a loss of a leg or a limb, or can have huge effect on the function of that organism. Last thing we're going to talk about today is the classification of animals. Biologists classify animals basically into groups based on three things. The body structure of the animal, that's going to be a big one. The developmental process of the animal, and the DNA of animals. Now, what we're looking for in classification really is we're looking at similarities and differences, right? And that's what classification is all about. That's why, for example, if I take a dog and compare a dog to a wolf, right? So a domesticated dog and a wolf, there's a lot of similarities. We can say they're related, just as I can take, myself and my first cousin, and there's going to be similarities between us, which is going to point to us being blood related. Where if I take me and some guy that I find in the middle of Mongolia, well, there's probably a less chance that there's going to be much similarities because we come from different lineage. That's the same thing with biologists. They're just trying to classify animals into groups based upon the body structure, the development, and the DNA. How are they similar? Now understand, all classification does for us is point to similarities, and it helps us better organize and structure our understanding of animals. Now, biologists also try to take that to infer evolutionary lineage and common ancestry and things like that, but that's not what classification really can do. It can't teach us the past, but it can tell us about the present. So that's why we use classification. We've actually identified in science, in the life sciences, 35 major groups, okay, some more, some less, depending upon who you're talking to, or phyla, into which all 1.5 million species of animals actually belong. And I got an image here for you that I want to show you guys to finish up with. This is an image I pulled off of the internet that just shows some of them. So in the animal kingdom, there's some phyla like Annelida, which are segmented worms like earthworms, and then nematodes, which are roundworms, and then arthropods, which would be all the insect groups, and then all the subphyla and classes of arthropods that exist. And then you have Platyhelminthes, which is a type of flatworm known as Planera. You have Porifera, like sponges. You have echinoderms, like starfish and sea urchins. You have cnidarians, like jellyfish and coral, anemones, hydras. You have mollusks, right, like octopuses and shellfish and snails and slugs. You have chordata, okay, vertebrate organisms, amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals and fish. All of these organisms, okay, all of these different subspecies and different groups can all fit into the animal kingdom because they share similar properties. They're heterotrophs. They move, they reproduce sexually most of the time, okay, and they have to regulate their body. And that's what the animal kingdom is. So we're going to dig in deep, and we're going to learn about invertebrates first. That's where we're going to be heading next. So I hope you just got an idea and a little overview of this is what we're talking about when we talk about animals. And next we're going to start to actually move in this journey of learning each of these. We're going to go through and learn many of these organisms that we see in this drawing. So thanks for your time. All right, guys, don't forget WSQ 35 now is finished. You write your summary, your questions, post those on Haiku to me, and I will see you guys later.